Hi, my name is Tom Bradford. I'm a barrister and partner at the law firm Freeths. This video is on settled status and what your options are as an EU national. This video is part of a series, so please subscribe and click the notification bell for more updates on settled status, particularly as we approach Brexit. Let's start with the chronology. So the three key dates are here: Brexit, so exit day, the end of the transition period, and the deadline for applications. We're going to deal with all three. All three are important, but perhaps the most important of them is the end of the transition period. So that's the 31st of December 2020. If you're resident in the UK by that date, or if you enter the UK before that date, then you will be able to stay on and ultimately acquire settled status. If you haven't been in the UK for 5 years, by the 30th of June 2021, then you'll need to apply for a pre-settled status. That will then give you another 5 years to go on and then apply for full settled status, if you like. Now, the application route is, it was said, was going to open at the end of 2018. So we're not there yet, and there's been various different indications about what's actually taking place with the application route. So the latest is that it's going to be phased in from the end of 2018, but only fully, quote, open upon March 2019. So we hope it opens as soon as possible. But what I want to talk about here is what you'll need to do when it does open. Either by that point you'll have been in the UK for 5 years or not. If you've been in the UK for 5 years when it opens, then you'll be able to apply early. As I say, even if you're able to do so pre-Brexit, you'll be able to apply for settled status if it does open before that time. But if you haven't been in the UK for 5 years, then you'll be able to apply for pre-settled status. I'll just show you in this diagram the 5-year period. So the latest that you could have come to the UK to apply for full settled status at the end of the transition period will be from the beginning of 2016. So if you've come into the UK at the beginning of 2016, you will be able to clock up 5 years by the end of the transition period. That's not to say that you will need to apply then, or that that's the deadline for the applications. It's not. The deadline for applications is months afterwards, on the 30th of June 2021. But the significant thing about the scheme, the EU settlement scheme that this represents a part of, is that if you do not make an application and you go beyond the 30th of June 2021, so you go to the 1st of July 2021, without having made an application either for settled status or for pre-settled status, then you'll be in the UK unlawfully. Now, of course, if by that point you've applied for British citizenship, let's say, then that will be one thing. You won't need to apply for settled status or pre-settled status. And I've got a separate video here on how to do that, how to naturalise as a British citizen and get a British passport. That's an alternative route. But if you don't do that and you're an EU citizen, then you'll need to make an application. Now, one of the interesting features of the EU settlement scheme is it appears to be the case that you'll need to have your 5 years residence up to the point at which you make your application. That's different from the current applications that EU citizens can make now under EU law. So currently you can apply for a certificate to confirm your right of permanent residence in the UK, even if, and that's the same period, one of 5 years, but you need to have been doing what they call a qualifying activity, like working or studying with comprehensive sickness insurance. But it's the same period of 5 years. But that 5-year period can be at some point in the past. That could be from, say, 2010 to 2015, and you could be applying later in 2018 for confirmation that you accrued that right. That appears to be different from applying for settled status, which needs to have been the previous 5 years. Now that could represent an issue for some, because the position in relation to continuity of residence is this, that and this is again the same test for applying for permanent residence and applying for settled status, that you can spend essentially half the year, 180 days, in the country, but if you spend the rest of the time outside of the country, then you will not break the continuity of your leave, and you can have 1 year out of the country, a whole year out of the country for a good reason. In one instance, in the 5-year period, you qualify for settled status at the end of the 5 years. But that 5-year period can be at some point in the past, whereas for the EU settlement scheme, applying for settled status, that will have to be 5 years back from the date of application, as far as we can see so far. Watch this space and, as I say, subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on this point. But it looks like it has to be 5 years in the past. So if you look at this 5-year period, that means the latest you could have entered the UK is the beginning of 2016 up to 2020, and at that point you could apply for settled status by the 30th of June 2021. Now bear in mind, that's only if you're securing settled status pre-Brexit. The idea behind the transition period is that as long as you're in the UK before the end of 2020, so by the 30th of December 2020, then you will be able to apply for pre-settled status and go on to secure settled status at some later stage. But if you come into the UK after the 31st of December 2020, so at the beginning of 2021, then you will not be subject to the EU settlement scheme. You'll be subject to the new immigration rules, which would apply then, and which may be different. That route will be closed. We'll see what's going to be agreed, but there'll be new immigration rules. And one can say, I suppose, with one confidence, that the position will be more onerous for you. It will be more, most likely, more difficult to secure the equivalent of settled status and to secure indefinite leave to remain. The only reason I say that is that it's the primary rationale for political rationale, at least for Brexit, that there will be a different regime in place that's more onerous in respect of EU nationals. That's been a consistent position, but absent any major policy change, it will be the case that the position will be more onerous for EU nationals after that point. So that means that you need to apply for pre-settled status by the 30th of June 2021, or settled status if you can, if you've been here for 5 years and you haven't broken the continuity of your leave. But you need to have been resident in the UK by the 31st of December 2020. So I've just got one more example here. It's that, just to illustrate the point, this is someone who's been in the UK from the beginning of 2018 to 2020. So right up to, at the end of the transition period, he or she has been in the UK for 3 years. So he or she does not need to apply for settled status then. They'll still be able to wait until the deadline. But, and this is an important point, there may be a backlog. Some may say it's likely that there would be a backlog because over 3 million EU nationals live in the UK and they all need to make applications. So what this means is that there will be a great many applications. We don't know how, to what extent they'll be phased over this period. I think it's the government's hope that they will be phased over the period. That's the rationale for, or one of the rationales for opening the application route early. But there have been many precedents for problems with application routes run by UK government departments. And one hopes that's not going to be the case here. The idea is that there's going to be an electronic system, there may be an app in place for iPhone and Android, where you'll be able to apply for settled status through that. Now, one doesn't know whether that's going to be effective or whether it's going to be fully functional. One hopes so, but nevertheless, even if the application process is automated, it's difficult to see how the conduct assessment, which has got to be made, and it will be made, is going to be conducted without any human element. If this is going to be completely automated or not, I would suspect that there would have to be some element of human decision making, so it's not just determined by an algorithm. And in that case, quite a lot of reliance will be put on the electronic system. So one hopes it works, but there's I think a lot to be said for attempting to avoid the backlog. So although the date is in 2021, there's a lot to be said for applying as soon as the application route opens. I'm going to be doing video guides on the new application route as soon as it does open. So you'll have a video guide to how to actually do the application. But there's a lot to be said for applying early, given that 3 million people are going to be applying, and there may well be a backlog. But to use this example now, 3 years. So this person has been in the UK for 3 years, since 2018, 2019 and 2021. Remember, they don't have to, for settled status, they don't have to be doing a qualifying activity like working or studying with comprehensive sickness insurance. They just have to have been resident in the UK. And again, I've shown you the absence requirements. So if you go over the absence requirements, so the 180 days that I showed you, or the 1 year for a good reason on one occasion in the 5 years, then that resets the clock for the purposes of the calculation. But for this example, let's just say that this person has been in the UK for 3 years and they haven't reset the clock through any absence from the UK. That means they will need to stay another 2 years to secure settled status. But they'll need to apply by the 30th of June 2021. If they don't, then they'll be in the UK unlawfully, and that's the key message. So what they'll then be able to do, having applied for pre-settled status, having applied for pre-settled status on the 30th of June 2021, they'll be able to then go on and apply for settled status in 2022 in this example. If it took longer, then so be it. So in fact, the last tranche of applications will be on or about the 30th of December 2020, and that will take them 5 years ahead. So those people will be accruing, the last batch will be accruing settled status 5 years from that date, so at the end of 2025. So at the end of 2025, the last batch of people will accrue their right to settled status, or the ability to apply for settled status, and will make their applications. And then after that, the EU settlement scheme, one imagines, will be wound up or closed down, because, as I say, it will only apply to those who are resident before the 31st of December 2020. Yeah. So just to finish this point, settled status will replace the current permanent resident status after the transition period ends. Now, query to what extent they'll run in parallel until that point, or until Brexit. There's, I think, a diminishing reason to apply for permanent residence, one might argue. Having said that, there are various benefits to applying for permanent residence now, which you can do now before the settled status route opens. The government's position is that you don't need to, but if there is a hard Brexit, if you like, or or a no-deal Brexit rather, where nothing is agreed, then the current position is that the provisional agreement on citizens' rights is subject to an overarching deal. So that means that it would put a lot of uncertainty on what the position is. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it would be remarkable if there wasn't some scheme in place, even if there is a no-deal Brexit. But if we do secure a deal, it's going to be on this basis. Now, if there is a New Deal Brexit, then I'll be producing some material on that and what your rights may be. But as far as I can see, it would be likely to be the case that you'd have something similar in any event. But it's given that settled status will replace permanent residence status, there will be a period in which they'll run in parallel, but at which point there'll be less and less reason to apply for permanent residence, to apply to confirm your right of permanent residence. The current position, so before the settled status route opens, is you can apply for a registration certificate. This is the registration certificate. That's if you haven't been in the UK doing a qualifying activity for 5 years. So if you haven't been, then you can apply for a registration certificate, and it confirms that you're in the UK lawfully exercising a EU treaty right, like working, at the point of the determination of the application. But it's limited to that extent. The other application you can make is, if you're an EU national, is for a document certifying permanent residence. So you accrue the right to permanent residence at the 5-year point, having done a qualifying activity in the UK. So if you have 5 years of P60s from your employer, you've been working in the UK as an EU national, you have 5 years of P60s, and you can apply for a document certifying permanent residence. That's this document. And there is a benefit to applying for this, because if you do, the position is you'll be able to swap that for the new status for the new settled status, which we're talking about here. You'll be able to swap that out without having to make an application. So there is that benefit. You can effectively get this out of the way now and then apply. Now, I mentioned this point before about the difference in the calculation of the most recent 5-year period and in previous periods. So it may be that you've broken the continuity of residence by staying out of the UK for, say, 18 months in a particular in the most recent 5 years, but you do have 5 years uninterrupted, continuous stay in the UK at a previous date. Say, to use the same example, from 2010 to 2015. Now, in that case, you'll be able to apply for permanent residence now and then swap your card out, notwithstanding the recent break of continuity in the most recent 5 years. So you can see that for a category of people, it will be worth applying for permanent residence now and then swapping out their cards, rather than, for example, applying for pre-settled status and then applying later for settled status. It might be that you want greater certainty and you want to apply. You want to get settled status as soon as possible. So that's a route to achieving that. Just one last point, which is that there is a status indefinite leave to remain. This applies to various migrants and EU nationals in certain circumstances. It looks like settled status is basically going to be indefinite leave to remain, but it seems to have been described separately under this name, settled status, but it seems in substance to be the same as indefinite leave to remain. But I'm going to be releasing some more details on that, because that's still an issue to be determined. So thanks very much for listening. As I say, this is part of a series. I have another video which is on how to become a British citizen, Brexit and settled status. That's basically if you don't want to apply for settled status, you want to naturalise as a British citizen. Many people do want to do that because of their country's position on dual citizenship. So do bear that in mind. And as I say, subscribe and click the notification bell to get my updates as soon as I release them. Thanks.